The presidents of Brazil and Colombia agreed to join actions for the protection of the Amazon. This accompanies the Brazilian consensus agreement signed during the summit of South American heads of states. In Peru, Dina Boluarte's government authorized the entry of U.S. troops into its territory for joint training with its armed forces. And in Zimbabwe, the government announced that it will hold nationwide elections on August 23rd, ending months of long suspense. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Wednesday, the presidents of Brazil and Colombia, Luis Ignacio da Silva and Gustavo Petro, respectively, met at the Alvorada Palace in Brasilia to discuss the protection of the Amazon. The two presidents also discussed the recent meeting of South American presidents in Brasilia, the political situation in the region, and the environment and the Amazon rainforest. According to the statement itself, President Petro confirmed that he would attend the meeting of Amazonian countries in Belém in August. In response, President Lula agreed to attend the Forum of Scientific Debates on the Amazon, a preparatory event for the Belém meeting on July 8th in Leticia, Colombia, a town on the border between the countries where Petro will also be present. Argentina's Minister of Economy Sergio Massa announced from China that as of June 2nd, companies will be able to trade using the yuan as the effective currency. Authorities detailed that the commercial exchange regime will allow companies to use yuan without the intermediation used in this type of operations. They also stated that the measure will have an impact on the protection of the Argentine Central Bank's reserves to avoid fraudulent maneuvers. In turn, Massa stated that the measure will add an incentive to exports in yuan and will contribute to the strategy of de-dollarizing economic operations. In Chile, professors mobilized to demand that President Gabriel Boric give answers to the teachers' union in its demand for labor improvements. According to local media, at least 7,000 members of the Professors Association marched through the center of the capital city of Santiago in the middle of the national strike, demanding the fulfillment of the commitments that the government assumed with the sector. The professors' march also arrived at the Presidential Palacio de la Moneda, where they demanded President Gabriel Boric to comply with the established payments, including payment of the so-called historical debt in violation of the law passed in 1981, which requires an adjustment of the salaries of public teachers with respect to the private sector. The Peruvian government authorized the entry of U.S. troops into its territory for joint training with the country's armed forces. The action plan establishes activities with the armed forces related to the international military exercise Resolute Sentinel 2023. The military drill includes the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Space Force. The entry of U.S. troops was approved by Congress on May 19th with vast support of the far right. Only left-wing lawmakers opposed it. Most members agree that the measure would jeopardize national sovereignty and would not guarantee the country's security. The governments of Mexico and the United States have agreed on collaboration mechanisms to address migration, arms trafficking, and the fentanyl crisis. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador held a meeting on Tuesday with U.S. Presidential Advisor on Homeland Security Elizabeth Sherwood. At the meeting held at the National Palace, the Mexican President and Sherwood discussed the measures implemented in the U.S. to control arms sales and the migration issue, pointing out that there are 1 million people in regulated labor mobility. By the end of the meeting, Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said regarding the trafficking of fentanyl that both governments have stepped up cooperation to determine the flows and identify those responsible. In the United States, hundreds of Amazon staff members in Seattle walked off the job on Wednesday afternoon, demanding a flexible remote work policy and renewed commitments to reducing carbon emissions to zero. According to its organizers, nearly 2,000 employees had pledged to participate in the one-hour walkout slated to start at noon. Of those, roughly 900 planned to gather outside Amazon headquarters in Seattle's South Lake Union neighborhood, while another 1,000 would join from offices around the world. The walkout comes after a year of cost-cutting measures that have affected nearly every part of Amazon's sprawling business. The layoffs have affected workers in advertising, human resources, gaming, stores, devices, and Amazon Web Services, the company's cloud computing division. The company has more than 350,000 corporate and tech employees globally.
Today, we're here because a lot of Amazonians feel in their gut that something is not right with the company. And there are a lot of signs of this, such as a rigid, one-size-fits-all return-to-office mandate. Today looks like it might be the start of a new chapter in Amazon's history, when tech workers coming out of the pandemic stood up and said, we still want a say in this company and the direction of this company. We still want a say in important decisions that affect all of our lives.
On Wednesday, Honduras government launched a plan to save Lake Yohoa, its largest freshwater natural reserve, endangered by the aquaculture industry, agricultural activities, deforestation, and environmental damaging activities. The initiative, fostered by President Xiomara Castro, aimed at suspending all environmental operating licenses for the aquaculture industry that is destroying the lake. In a ceremony at the Los Naranjos Archaeological Park, the Honduran head of state asked her ministers to proceed with the cancellation of said licenses while launching a reforestation campaign on site to save the place that held a culture that flourished 800 years ago.
The Honduran people, through me, order the suspension of the environmental operating licenses of large-scale aquaculture industry that is destroying our lake Yohoa.
In a short time, we are going to have puddles, you could say, because the problem we are suffering in the area is quite serious. We need to be mindful and call on the conscience of restaurant owners, hotel owners, even the tourists who visit us.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Romania, some 20,000 primary and secondary school teachers demonstrated in Bucharest to demand better salaries, continuing a strike that began more than a week ago. The industrial action has even forced a halt to the change of Prime Minister, agreed between the Conservative National Liberal Party and the Social Democratic Party, that was due to take place last Friday as part of the coalition agreement signed by the two formations last December. The education unions rejected a new government offer of two annual bonuses of €500 and maintained their demand for a 25% increase in salaries, which currently range from €500 to €1,000 per month, depending on years of experience. On Wednesday, the Russian government welcomed Venezuela's intention to join the BRICS, saying it reflects the bloc's growing strength in international geopolitics. The head of the Russian Foreign Ministry for Latin America, Alexander Shetinin, said that these announcements were in line with the bloc's stance on international issues and its model of multilateral cooperation without sanctions or pressure. The statements come after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro informed Brazilian President Lula da Silva of his country's interest in joining the group. In this context, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said that Beijing welcomed the expansion of the mechanism as a platform for cooperation. Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki continues his official visit to Russia as part of the strengthening of relations between the two countries and met President Putin. Afwerki's four-day visit to Moscow started on Tuesday night with the aim of strengthening the economic and commercial ties between the two nations. On Wednesday, the Eritrea's president laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Moscow, and at the end of the day met Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin, where both leaders discussed issues of bilateral interest. During the talks, Putin noted the good prospects in many areas for the development of trade and economic ties between both countries.
Eritrea recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of its independence. It matches with the date of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our countries. Let me congratulate you for this and thank you for the relations between our countries that have developed and strengthened over the years during the time you governed the country. Of course, we should first of all pay attention to the development of trade and economic ties. I would like to highlight the fact that we have good prospects in many areas, which we will talk about today. Contexts are developing in the political sphere.
Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki said Western powers' acts of domination over the past 3 years have sought to impose a unipolar world order triggering multiple global crises.
The global order, which is on the cusp of radical transformation, requires objective appraisal and mutual consultations as a timely subject matter and phenomenon of paramount importance and significance. The common assessment that we undertake will in turn be vital in the formulation of programs and partnership that we chart out. The reckless ideology and unbridled acts of domination pursued in the past 30 years to impose a unipolar world order have endangered multiple crises and massive destruction.
During the U.S.-European Union Trade and Technology Council meeting in Sweden, the European Commissioner for Competition, Margrethe Vestager, said that the European Union and the United States will advance within weeks a draft of Artificial Intelligence Code of Conduct.
Within the next weeks, we will advance a draft of an AI code of conduct, of course also taking industry input, taking input from independents, and then of course invite colleagues to sign up for the drafting in order to have very, very soon a final proposal for a code of conduct for industry to commit to voluntarily. So,
OPEC Secretary General Haytham Al-Ghai said he agrees with the return of Iran to the global market, but regrets that the U.S. sanctions on the Persian country are preventing this. Haytham Al-Ghai pointed out that once the sanctions are lifted, he will welcome Iran into this market and stressed that the country has the capacity to provide considerable amounts of oil in a short-term time. The OPEC official said the demand for crude oil is currently on the rise, which is why he considers Iran could become a major player among the group's member countries. On Wednesday in India, hundreds of protesters from Kuki and Sami tribes from Manipur staged a demonstration in New Delhi against an explosion of inter-ethnic violence this month that killed at least 70 people and left tens of thousands displaced. The clashes erupted earlier in May over a proposed government policy that would have benefited the majority Meiteis community that dominates the political and social landscape of the Indian state. Fresh deadly clashes were reported on Sunday in the remote northeastern part of the country, although the exact number of fatalities is unknown. In the meantime, State Chief Minister Biren Singh told local media that 40 suspected militants had been killed along with 2 policemen in the past 2 days. Thousands of troops were deployed to restore order while around 30,000 people fled their homes for safety and mobile internet has been cut for a week. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break, we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. Zimbabwe will hold nationwide elections on August 23rd, according to a government statement on Wednesday, ending month-long suspense. With a population of 15 million people, according to the latest census, Zimbabwe will prepare for elections on August 23rd this year. In this regard, elections for the National Assembly and local government are expected to be held the same day. President Emerson Mnangagwa replaced strongman ruler Robert Mugabe in 2017 and won the 2018 violence-stained presidential election with 50.8% of the vote. Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party, which has been in power since independence in the 1980s, will face off against the Citizens Coalition for Change, led by Nelson Chamisa, who will be Nangawa's oppositor for a second time. On Wednesday, the President of Senegal, Macky Sall, launched his National Dialogue Initiative 9 months ahead of presidential elections in February next year. The presidential initiative takes place against a background of popular unrest in the run-up to a court verdict against political opponent Ousmane Sonko. Some opposition parties have reacted by denouncing the presidential dialogue and announcing the launch of a counter-dialogue. President Macky Sall is yet to announce if he is going to run for a controversial third mandate. In his address, Macky Sall pledged to be firm in the face of growing tensions.
I have established dialogue as a principle of governance that transcends the power-opposition confrontation and integrates all the nation's vital forces, because national life cannot be mobilized by political antagonisms alone, to the detriment of other priorities of common interests. The presidential election of February 2024 is an obvious topic for dialogue. I would like to say here that the government will take all the necessary steps to organize a peaceful, democratic, free and transparent election, as our country knows so well how to do.
At a press conference in Addis Ababa, the African Union spokesperson on the crisis in Sudan, Mohamed El Hassan Labat, said that the suspension of talks in Saudi Arabia between the warring parties in Sudan should not discourage mediation efforts. The African Union intends to propose a political dialogue to involve a broad cross-section of Sudanese society in the near future.
In difficult negotiations, this is a very classic phenomenon, that a party suspends, threatens to suspend, and then can come back after. The negotiations take a different form. All this is possible and predictable. But this should in no way discourage mediators who are still very important, the United States and Saudi Arabia, whom we strongly support to continue their efforts.
On Wednesday, one of Africa's most prominent authors, playwrights, and feminists, Ama Ata Aidoo, passed away. The respected writer, known for her exceptional literary contributions and activism, died of a brief illness. In a statement, her family expressed their grief over the loss of their beloved relative and writer, while also appealing for privacy during this difficult time. Throughout her career, Professor Aidoo gained recognition for her portrayal and celebration of African women's experiences in her works, including notable titles such as The Dilemma of a Ghost, Our Sister Killjoy, and Changes. She vehemently challenged the Western perception that casts African women as downtrodden, advocating for their empowerment and agency. A passenger plane of the Venezuelan state-owned airline Conviasa landed on Wednesday, May 31st at the International Airport of Damascus, a trip by means of which the authorities of both brotherly nations announced the resumption of regular flights between the two countries after 12 years of suspension due to the war and the blockade. Let's see.
This first flight of Conviasa Airlines is in compliance with the instructions of President Nicolás Maduro to increase communication and relations between the two brotherly peoples. A sovereign decision that was taken in defiance of the unjust and inhumane U.S. blockade unilaterally imposed on both nations.
It is the will of our president. This route was first initiated by our Lieutenant Commander Hugo Chavez, and it is the will of our President Nicolás Maduro to connect these two brotherly peoples, and today we are consolidating it with the arrival of our Caracas-Damascus flight.
This constitutes a victory for both peoples, and is the breaking of this blockade imposed by imperialism, trying to bend the will of our peoples, which is unbreakable, that of Syria and that of Venezuela. They will not be able to defeat us. They have not been able to, and from now on, a new world is being built, where Syria and Venezuela have been the protagonists. There is no doubt that something new is in the making, and this old system will have to die and accept it.
On board Flight 102, passengers arrived in Damascus, including economists, politicians, travel agency representatives, and journalists. Headed by the Venezuelan Minister of Transportation and Vice Foreign Minister of the South American nation. A direct route that not only saves time and money, but also helps to level economic relations with the excellent political ties shared by both countries.
It is much easier to get here since we had to make many stops before. So the trip is shorter, easier, and more comfortable for everyone.
This route in particular has brought closer two countries that have many interests in common, both back and forth, and that is the value of tourism. We are confident that this is a step to develop inbound tourism in both nations, in addition to facilitating business travel between the two countries.
The flight will take place regularly every 2 weeks, and the trip takes about 12 hours without a stopover between Damascus and Caracas. A step that is expected to open great expectations for cooperation between the two countries in several areas.
This step will have positive economic results for both friendly peoples, and this is what we aspire to. Therefore, to achieve it, we will follow up with our Venezuelan counterparts on all these measures and steps, and we will reevaluate and reactivate all the agreements signed previously, frozen for the last 12 years due to the difficult circumstances suffered because of the blockade, both in Venezuela and Syria.
Syria and Venezuela, two brotherly countries, together managed to resist and emerge victorious against the hegemonic plans of American imperialism. A reality that is evidenced by the resumption of this flight with great political, economic and social value for both countries.
Hisham News, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
We have come to the end of this news program, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.